A very good morning to you all. Welcome to Sunrise Daily. I'm Chamberlain Uso.
Well, it's a beautiful Thursday morning from here in Abuja. I'm Kairi Okikule.
And I'm Ayo Makide. Good morning and welcome.
Yes, indeed. And so today is also the day that we'll just go right ahead and take a look at how do the dailies reflect what perhaps you may have seen or expect a solution to. So we've got Iho Akeria here with us. He's the Abuja Bureau Chief of the Guardian newspapers. Good morning and thank you for coming on today.
Yes, good morning. Good to be here.
Well, we'll start off with, we know that Labour and government will be meeting today. So many are looking to see what will they eventually agree on. Let's start with Tribune. They have something related to that particular scenario, which many are looking forward to this morning. So the front page of Nigerian Tribune today reads, is it power sector spending? That's the theme. 13 years after, reps question $11 billion withdrawn from excess crude account. And the writer here says, Senate to review power contracts to save $1.2 billion fine from foreign reserve. The questions about this sector, well, it will never end.
Yeah.
Until we all have uninterrupted power supply, maybe.
Yes, it's. I'm sure most Nigerians are really worried at this point. 13 years after, we are talking about $11 billion to be accounted for. Another worry for Nigerians this morning probably will be all the numerous probes by the National Assembly, the Senate, the House of Representatives. From the, if I can recall properly, from the 7th Assembly, 8th, and now we're at the 9th Assembly, we have so many probes. Nobody's in jail, right? These probes, and you saw the last probe by the last probe of the NDDC, where the minister, Godswill Akpabio, made all kinds of revelations, even against members of the National Assembly itself. And I'm sure that is where now it is now back and forth. So I'm not sure. The 9th Assembly has to sit up and with all the promises that the current administration made, most Nigerians are yet to see the gains of those promises.
Could there be a National Assembly?
With darkness still pervasive.
Could there be a National Assembly power sector pro-fatigue on the part of Nigerians?
Perhaps.
Saying, look, if you do this, to what end now?
No, perhaps. People now see these probes as jamboree, some sort of jamboree really. But we need to get out of this and ensure, as it is, the power sector is privatized, no metering, crazy bills everywhere, darkness still pervasive. And
I thought they said Abuja was a lot better in terms of metering compared to several other areas. Is that the case?
I think so. Where I live around, Kubo axis. I'm sure most of the residents they have meter.
So when you say the all of these probes and all seem to amount to nothing, does that also mean that all that hue and cry by the Senate President is also empty? When he was also complaining about the process of the privatization of the power sector.
Yes, the Senate itself is the third arm of government. It's very strong, and most Nigerians would expect what happened in the 8th Assembly. You saw how the National Assembly, particularly the Senate under former Senate President Bukola Saraki, actually held President Muhammadu Buhari and the administration to account. Yes, a lot of people will give it all kinds of interpretation, whether it is bickering, whether it is because of political differences and all of that. But that is what Nigerians really want to see. Transparency and accountability in all the probes, such that, there will be proper outcome. But as it is, for me, it is just another jamboree, really. Nigerians are tired of these probes. We want concrete results.
But what would you call a proper outcome for a probe?
Proper outcome would be, because who are these people misappropriating the funds allocated to the power sector? The $11 billion we are talking about here is probably misappropriated by someone. And the president himself also alluded to the fact that a former president, his predecessor, a former president, also needed to account for about 16 billion. So all of these resources, it is lying somewhere, either in the hands of some or warehoused by some individuals. Are they bigger than the country? Are they bigger than the laws of this country? So I'm not sure many Nigerians are inspired this morning watching us still talking about probes coming from. We want to see the national and say we began probes and the probe is going to be 2 weeks and persons have been indicted and these persons have been handed over to the FCC.
But we should also let them know that the National Assembly can only do as much. They don't have that power to, well, prosecute, as it were. Whatever they find their findings are, it's up to the executive to take it from there. So beyond that, what can they do? You
are probably right. If you take a cue from the U.S., where you have Nancy Pelosi, the U.S. House of Reps, you know, belonging to the Democrats, while the Senate is for the Republicans. You will see what's happening there. The advantage for Nigeria really at this point is that both the House of Reps and the Senate is controlled by the ruling party. So I do not see how they are not able to aggregate aggregate what they want to do for the benefit of Nigerians. So that is where the problem is, I guess.
All right. Oh, let's take a look at the Vanguard newspaper. The front page is about COVID-19. And leads with outrage over security breach at airport. DSS man slapped aviation security officer at Abuja airport, says fan. Our man didn't slap any airport worker, DSS counters. CSOs condemn harassment of personnel enforcing COVID-19 rules. I mean, this is a lot. This is the usual back and forth. But, you know, looking at I believe this is related to COVID-19. You might need to pick up a copy of Vanguard to understand that story. But I recall the PTF recently, you know, threatening, you know, to suspend airlines over enforcement of COVID-19 protocols. And you hear the airline saying, we try our best, but it appears there are some people that are maybe bigger, VIPs and all that. How big a challenge is that really?
Well, it would appear to be a challenge, the PTF threatening to sanction airlines for inadequate compliance with COVID-19 protocols. You know, in this country, there is something that is amazing that we do in this country. We threaten, we will do, we shall do, we consider to do. We don't get things done. We threaten that things will be done. So for me, really, if any airline has breached, you know, the COVID-19 protocol, why wouldn't the PTF go ahead and sanction? We should sanction. Laws should be obeyed in this country. Once we leave Nigeria, we obey all the laws. Even the most mundane law, you see Nigerians queuing, very, you know, very humble. They queue. They don't ask any questions. They obey. The DSS man now is fought and back. Somebody slapping someone because he puts on uniform. He's supposed, you know, to be, you know, he's supposed to be enforcing the law on behalf of the people. In enforcing the law, what do you do? Do you use, you know, illegal means, unlawful means to assault somebody who is on duty, who is also performing his own duties? So it's going to be fought and back. But the real issue here is, are people, you know, are people accountable for their actions? The DSS man, beyond the DSS defending their officer and all of that, and fan insisting that their own staff has been slapped. We should have cameras. Why do we even ask? Are there no cameras?
Interestingly, it ties back
is cameras that should really determine what happened.
Interesting. It ties back to that talk about probe and the outcome. There should be some sort of action. You see the big picture on the front page shows Shiites holding protest. And on top of the nameplate, Khan replies presidency, talking about the Vanguard newspaper's front page, says FG twisting facts on Southern Kaduna crisis. I saw a particular editorial about the Southern Kaduna crisis yesterday that tried to detail, you know, some of the issues. I mean, it just tried to show the background, because I think for a lot of people, they see bits and pieces here and there, but this tried to aggregate everything together, and I think it was revealing really to see. But looking at what we have right now, the Southern Kaduna crisis, the fact that there have been peace accords, there have been, you know, allegations, counter allegations, there have been a lot of talk about it. Do you think we're getting to that conclusive, you know, part of this crisis?
Well, without sounding pessimistic this morning, the Southern Kaduna crisis have persisted for so many years, and there have been so many peace accords. Who obeys a peace accord in the absence of justice, true justice? I think that the root of the Southern Kaduna crisis is justice for the people of Southern Kaduna. Southern Kaduna is predominantly Christian populated, and why is it that under the administration of Governor El-Rufai, it would appear as if the situation is getting worse? More people are being killed, more people are being displaced. As governor of a state, the security and welfare of the people is the primary duty of the governor. Now, even the federal government, special forces are there,
even though the police,
by policemen, DS, everybody is there, and the killings continue.
Even though the police, the army are not under the purview of the state government.
But that is what we are to. But the truth is that the vehicles that the governors buy and donate to the security forces, they are not under their purview. So do they buy the vehicles for themselves to drive?
Oh.
Sometimes, yes, under the constitution, the president, you know, is the commander-in-chief. He's the one that controls the army and of course the police and all that. But we also know we are all Nigerians. We live in the states. The state governors have a way of also controlling them by supporting them with logistics vehicles, financial interventions here and there. So that extent, they tell the brigade commanders, the commissioners of police what they do, and often
they do.
I mean, it not direct them, not orders, but of course they inform them. I want this done because there's crisis here. Of course they do. Because one good turn deserves another.
Interesting how you put it.
Okay.
Well, there's a sports news. Messi robbed of his 7th Ballon d'Or. A couple of other stories, but let's leave it there.
All right, Leadership newspaper is next, and it talks about UN General Assembly. PMB engages world leaders on safe COVID-19 vaccines. That story you'll find on page 4 of the Leadership newspaper this morning. Decries violent extremism, proliferation of small arms, light weapons in Africa, seeks $50 billion to recharge Lake Chad, and president to attend Guinea-Bissau National Day celebration. I don't know which one of these, whether it's the lead headline or the riders that get you, but the one that I would love, you know, to hear you talk about is the proliferation of small arms and light weapons in Africa. You know, the president had been talking about movements of some funds for about 2 years or thereabout now, and the issue of small arms was one of the reasons for which the border was closed, and the IGP has also been making comments and all of that. So what do you make of this statement of the president decrying proliferation of small arms and light weapons in Africa, among others you may want to touch on?
Well, the president spoke well. Yes, I listened to him. He enumerated a lot of the challenges that African countries are facing. For Nigeria, basically, the Sahel region, particularly the northern Nigeria, the president himself understands that. He has repeatedly said so, that small and light weapons are flowing in from Libya down through Chad, Niger into Nigeria. But I do not understand why the president will be complaining all the time. He is the commander-in-chief. I'm sure one of the key components of why the president was elected in 2015 was the promise that he was going to reverse, downwards the security challenges we're having in the country. So if Nigerians have hired him through elections, to be the president and commander-in-chief, and at this point he's still lamenting, I think we are in some kind of trouble, really. I would have thought that the president will deploy all his powers, as it were. The issue of border security in Nigeria is so crucial, so serious. We are unable. We lament for over 3 to 4 decades. We lament that we have numerous porous borders. So if you have porous borders in your country, are you expecting the Americans, the South Africans to come and police your borders for you? Who exactly are we lamenting to as a country? I do not understand. If we have 2,000 porous borders, then engage people and let them block those porous borders. We talk about the porous borders and nothing gets done. The president is still lamenting that small and light weapons.
Well, let's just believe that work is going on that, because I mean, you just spoke there now about the security issues and all of that. But then that lead headline, UN General Assembly, the president engaging world leaders on safe COVID-19 vaccines. One wonders what that means. You listened to the speech.
Yes, I did. Apparently, I think the president is worried just as most leaders of other countries are bothered. They are worried. If you, as it is today, you look at the U.S., the casualty figures in the U.S. have surpassed, I think that should be about 20,000.
More than 200,000.
Yeah. So, and that got President Trump also worried. You have Brazil worried. Most of these countries are worried. And Nigeria is the biggest black nation on earth. Yes, we pray a lot. We've been saying that perhaps the prayers are helping us. We are not dropping dead as others are in other countries. The president, I guess, is trying to be proactive. Once there's a vaccine, the other day, I think the Russians sent in a vaccine that is still on trial. And we don't know what has happened to that. Perhaps the president is just trying to alert other nations who may have found a vaccine, that once they find the vaccines, they should remember that Nigeria is there to consume. We know we're a consumer nation. So interesting. we consume everything.
Well, you know,
which too should be actually, we should be finding a solution ourselves. We have all the scientists here too. Why do we always think that other nations will solve our problems for us? You know? But it's good for the president to say so. If they find a vaccine, they should bring for us to use to cure ourselves.
Well, I need to say this. I don't know what's happening to me in this year, Abuja. I had the wrong Tribune. So it was Thursday, but this is Thursday, so somehow I had them mixed up.
It happens.
But they also have electricity on this one as well at the bottom room, so who knows? Maybe this Abuja let you take things easy. But look at Nigerian Tribune. This is today's Tribune, guys. Let's look at that. Man, wife, 3 children, 20 others killed in Kogi petroleum tank and crash. It's bad enough. This is a national scandal. Many accidents are preventable, ascribed to the president. Buhari. Bello meets Fashola, seeks urgent repairs of federal roads in Kogi. I mean, yes, we tend to see a lot of these tanker-related accidents, articulated vehicle accidents involving lives. And sometimes you see these figures, they tend to forget, look, these are lives, for goodness sakes. And we don't seem to, I mean, from when you see these things, there are questions about, are we paying the right kind of attention to lives above all else?
Life has become very cheap in Nigeria. My heart goes to the families this morning who have lost their loved ones. I understand school children were also involved in that accident. For anybody, I drive through that road myself, and for anybody who drives through the Lokoja, Abuja or Kene road down south, you will agree that the roads in that axis are very, very, very bad. I also think that is why kidnappers, bandits and all that have taken advantage of the Abuja, Lokoja and the Okene highway. They are there. And this accident that occurred, you know, it's very, very regrettable. Now, this is where the Federal Road Safety Commission, for example, should come in. At the various articulated vehicle parks before they take off, don't we have a system in place where the vehicles can be checked? If you do accident investigation on this particular truck, you find that it's either the brakes aren't working well, the driver is overworked or something, maybe overworked, or even the driver himself may have been under the influence of drugs or something.
Because that's equally important.
But they happen even in Lagos.
Yeah, the MOTs, but there are usually questions about some of these things. I know that they're doing something to step up all of those things, but when they move from state to state, how do you enforce that if several other states don't have it?
Yeah, so this is where we should, for state governments, rather, for Yaya Bello, the governor of Kogi State, for example, what state governors can do is to also set up border checks, you know. Yeah, you can set up a border.
Shouldn't we be careful what we wish for? If you set up border checks, remember, some people are suing, who are they suing now for some of these checkpoints and roadblocks? Tanker drivers. Yeah. They say that the police, they accuse some other agencies and some other robbers take advantage of those checks. The police may mean well, but it turns out bad in some cases. And so they think, look, I'm not sure if it's what we should bring back now.
Yeah, in other countries, what happened? You cannot just drive a truck, for example, in the US and across 6 states. You are just driving or nobody's checking you whether your vehicle is good or not. So what I'm saying that Nigeria it comprises of federating units. There's nothing wrong in a state saying, look, create a big, before you enter this state, officials can check your vehicle to be sure that, you know, you do not come to pose a danger to the citizens and residents of that state. That is how to exert, you know, your independence as a state. So rather than, now it's time to look for solutions. Should everything be done by the federal government? We have the Federal Road Safety Corps, we have federal this, federal that. Now, the inadequacies are beginning to haunt us as a people. We should also think of evolving some other strategies.
We'll move on from this because it says Edo election, Oshomole accepts fate, says you win some, you lose some. So that's just that's Tribune this morning.
Well, let's now show you the front page of today's Vanguard newspaper. Lead story: UK MPs write Commonwealth on insecurity in Nigeria. It's interesting how, you know, from the one we took earlier and this one, there seems to be some similarities. But this is for today, clearly. And you see the rider, no genocide. They should focus on their problems. APC tells UK MPs, and you see British security alert, vote of no confidence on Buhari PDP. It appears as though there's just the politicizing, because you have, the parties responding to this. But I think more importantly is having a security response to this. This is what we're doing, and these are the results that we're getting. You see that sad one on the front page, the Kogi tanker fire tragedy. And right under that, Okowa to Obaseki, don't let lions, tigers torment Edo people. These terms again. It's amazing how politicians,
Is that the same one there?
Oh yes, absolutely.
Okay.
That's, you see that one. Don't let lions, tigers torment Edo people. I'm sure he's not talking about real lions and tigers here.
Yes, I think it's literary in this sense.
Okay,
before the elections, you saw a video trending where one of the politicians was allegedly telling lions and tigers in quotes, just as we had baboons in those days, that baboons and all that. So I think politicians are coming up with all kinds of innuendos where, the personae, where humans can be personated with animals, as it were. But I think in the case of Edo, they're actually talking about cultists, the tigers may be representating a particular cult group, and the lions may be a bigger and a wider, more fierce cult group or something. Who knows? But I think that is just what they are talking about. Nigerians are not interested in all these frightening rhetoric coming from politicians. Elections have held in Edo State. The people have spoken very clearly and loudly. It is time to build Edo State, to heal all the wounds. Good enough, Governor Obaseki himself has waved the olive branch to his main challenger, Pastor Izeyamu, and Izeyamu incidentally has not spoken. He's very quiet. He's a pastor, and I just hope that, like Oshomole himself have said it, you win some, you lose some. So, the president has congratulated the governor. So Edo people should heal their wounds. For me, I think that it is time to move forward.
Okay. The Guardian newspaper, your paper this morning, Nigerian medical doctors among least paid globally. That's definitely something troubling. Country's GDP spend on health ranks 109th out of 191, and only 50% of registered 72,000 doctors work in Nigeria. This is definitely disconcerting.
That's an investigative report by the Guardian. Incidentally, that is my own paper. The media for now is beginning to move into a lot of investigative stories, coming up with what is happening across the country, digging up issues for the doctors. You see that the Nigerian doctors, particularly the Nigerian Medical Association, JUHESU, the other time that is Joint Health Workers, Joint Health Sector Union, they were also on strike. Why is the Nigerian health sector engrossed in so much confusion, strike, and all of that? In fact, in the midst of COVID, we are having all of this. And the Guardian have done a good report this morning by throwing these issues up again. If Nigerian doctors are amongst the least paid in the world, I'm sure that is what also accounts for the
what they call
brain drain. Yes, where our best travels to other countries and they just stay there. We hope that the government can look at this more closely and find a way to either up their allowances and their salaries. Many Nigerians are lowly paid. What is the national minimum wage compared to the dollar right now? As journalists, how much are we also paid? So professionals in Nigeria are very poorly paid compared to their counterparts everywhere in the world, and I think that is something that the government needs to look at.
Let me squeeze this in. Excuse me. Look at New Telegraph. FG puts 8.7 billion naira aircraft for sale to cut governance cost. Bidders to deposit $50,000 in spec plane at Abuja Airport. FEC approves $1.9 billion rail line project to Niger Republic. Customs gets 549 million naira for laptops. Auditors to receive 745 million naira. So quite a popular of stories in this lead story.
Yeah, two stories there quickly catches my attention. The one on the federal government putting up one of the presidential jets for sale. Don't forget, I remember very clearly, President Buhari said I think we have about 9 or 7 presidential jets, and he said as part of efforts to cut down the cost of running government, he doesn't need all of those jets, that once he is sworn in, he's going to cut down on the numbers of jets, maybe to 3 or so. This is the 5th year of the president in power. He's selling only one for now. But
how many do you expect?
It's a good. I expect, he said he was going to sell at least half of them. He said so himself. So, but it's good that he's starting to sell now. If he sells this one, gets the money in, and
perhaps it's because of the bureaucracy.
The bureaucracy of he's the president, and like I said, the National Assembly, they are one party. It's easy for him to push through a couple of things. The Federal Executive Council, I do also see that if the president wants to cut down on the cost of running government, who is going to oppose him? It's only when, if we are borrowing more and we are not even being opposed, is it now to cut cost of governance? So, and then this rail to Nigeria is amazing. We are still struggling to activate the rail from Lagos to Ibadan, and then a lot of visuals come out every time. People posing and they say, oh, the race will soon run and all of that. Then Lagos to Abuja, the entire south, there are no commercial rails. So what is the interest? What is Niger? In terms of strategic interest, what is Niger going to offer Nigeria that we are so committed in building a rail to Niger? I'm sure this is an issue for further interrogation and conversations in the days
maybe further investigation in terms of
course,
the profitability of those routes, if how it's going to move the economy forward. So who knows what we'll see, the kind of report in the next days ahead. But we'll have to thank you for coming on. Iho Akerika is the Abuja Bureau Chief of the Guardian newspapers. We will be back in a moment. Don't go away. All right, welcome back. Yes, we will be talking about metering this morning. We've got Mr. Nathan Shatti, who is the Commissioner Finance and Management Services for NERC NEC. Good morning, and thank you for joining us today.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Well, it is nightmarish for a lot of people in terms of getting meters. But we also do know there was that plan. I think they talked about get 5 million Nigerians metered who were charged based on estimated billing. First, could you tell us, where are we in ensuring that Nigerians are metered, at least as recently directed by the president?
Okay, thank you, Chamberlain. I think it's important for us to know that, yes, Mr. President has given a directive for mass metering of Nigerian electricity customers, but that process has begun. Right now, the Commission, working with some key stakeholders in the industry.
What's the target?
Ministry of
the
Finance.
one that has begun. Is
the
it the
target
same 5 million?
Yes, it's 5 million, but there are two processes to it. First and foremost, there is the mass bulk procurement of meters. Recall, Mr. President also approved a 1-year waiver for the lifting of the 35% tax levy on imported meters. That we are also taking advantage of it, because that is like the low-hanging fruits. Because right now we have what we call the meter asset providers, MAPs, who have signed contracts with the discos, and they have a responsibility to meter Nigerians. Recall when we came up with the regulation in 2018, we gave a permit to about 22 meter asset providers, which we popularly call MAPs. And those meter asset providers went into full swing to place orders to import meters into Nigeria. Unfortunately, there was a little change in the fiscal policy, whereby there is an additional 35% tax levy on imported meters. That affected the supply process, the supply chain process for the MAPs. And so some of them had their goods stuck at the port because they couldn't clear, because there's an additional cost. Some, of course, had their orders, they had to stop their orders because they wanted to know what is going to happen, because it's going to change the price of meters. So at that point, we had to now engage the government to find out a resolution for that additional 35%. So that resolution, that waiver that Mr. President gave, has given us an opportunity now to use our MAPs to quickly make their orders effective, so that we'll be able to clear. We are looking at, between now and the end of the year, between 1 to 1.5 million meters will arrive this country.
But
currently, there are inventories with the MAPs. We have inventories close to about 400-500 meters with the meter asset providers, which they've started rolling out. Now, the 1.5 million I'm talking about is going to be rolled out, taking advantage of Mr. President's approval.
So, what about the ones that are stuck at the
ones that are stuck have been cleared now, because what happened is that after the Mr. President's directive, an instruction from the Ministry of Finance was given to the customs to clear any goods, whether it's components or fully built meters at the ports. Yeah. And that, I believe, has been done right now. So as we speak, the MAPs, with the few that were at the port, that got stuck at the port, and the inventories that they have, they are working to ensure that Nigerians get meter.
But
remember,
when you say that you believe that that has been done, as at early this week, I believe a lot of this, well, called them manufacturers now, said that their goods are still stocked. So is this something that happened yesterday, or? Okay,
let me say, manufacturers, I don't know at what point they say their goods are stocked at the port. Remember, this issue started before COVID. And the process, when Mr. President approved this, it was around July. And now, the instruction to customs was for any goods at the port at all that relates to meters or components should be cleared if they were held based on the 35% additional levy. Now, as we speak, I will not be able to tell you whether there are nothing at the port. All I know is that instructions have been given by the Ministry of Finance to Nigerian Customs to clear any meters at the port. And if there is any, I'm going to take that up because we have a committee working with the Ministry of Finance, and Custom is also a member of that committee. And so we'll be able to understand as of today
what the issue is.
If there's any at the port, and then we want to find out what the issues are, and we'll deal with that immediately.
Right. Now, I'd like to put this in context just to understand where we are and where we want to get to. I think it was fourth quarter 2019 report about the metering gap. I think just about 40% of consumers had been metered at that point. How much of a gap do we have right now?
Right now, with the additional enumeration and the rest, we have about 11 million meters on the billing platform of the discos. Out of that 11 million, we have close to 7 million now, about 6.8 thereabout, that do not have meters. Before now, around end of the year, 2019, we had about 6.3 million gap, and that gap is increasing. And the process that affected the procurement, the supply process for the MAPs really slowed down the rollout of meters because there was uncertainty. And so the MAPs wanted to know what is going to happen. Recall, in June, the Commission, because of the change in the Forex, from 360 by CBN to 380, we had to go and review the prices of the meters. But that wasn't taking into account the 35% additional levy because we knew we were working with the government, with the Ministry of Finance to get this waiver. So when this waiver came, all the impediments now that was affecting MAPs to import meters have been removed. And so right now what we are working with them is that there are some committed orders that they have. There are some that are placing orders now to ensure that they fulfill their contractual obligations to the discos, and those are the ones now we are trying to work with. And CBN has also promised to support them in terms of trying to get FX. You know, there are issues with getting FX and the rest of them, so that it will be done clearly. And that was why I said between now and the end of the year, we should be able to have between 1 to 1.5 million meters brought into this country. That is aside the manufacturers that we have that have already cleared their components and are producing, because that is also going to support what is being imported. Remember,
I know there is a lot to deal with on this issue, but one of the constraints that a number of people have also highlighted about the slowness, or the reasons for the slowness of the metering initiative being as quick as it ought to be, is the difference in the components or the parameters that the disco sets. Some would say, okay, this disco is asking for certain parameters different from what that disco is asking for, and if there is no uniformity, there will be that delay, because if you want to use this particular meter with this particular disco, he's going to say, no, it doesn't meet my requirement or templates. Why was that even allowed in the first place? Because some recommend that, look, why don't we just use the same parameters for all the discos?
Now, you have to understand that meters are electronic equipments. There are standards. The Commission has what we call the metering code, which provides standards for meters. We also have a regulation that is called smart meter regulation that also try to include any additional IoTs of this world and the rest of them. So the fact is that there are standards for meters that can be deployed in the NESI, in the industry. And each DISCO has a responsibility to buy meters or to deploy meters that will communicate with their back-end office, that will be able to help you as a customer when you vend.
But isn't that a problem, Mr. Shati? Because if it's not uniform, that could also be reason for the delay, because if one MAP is not able to produce enough for this particular DISCO because of the requirements that they have made, it means that the people under that DISCO are going to be unable to use power.
Please understand, first and foremost, there is a contractual agreement between the DISCO and an MAP that this is the type of meter I need, and largely the meters are same or similar, largely. So there is no big difference that somebody is bringing in a meter that is very different from the other. So that agreement between the DISCO and the MAP has set the standards, has done everything within the context of the metering code that we have in the industry, meaning that you are not going beyond or outside what the code provides.
Doesn't that also make it a little difficult for the consumer? Because that means that a consumer cannot change from one DISCO to the other if he's not getting service.
The issue is that right now, the way the system is, each DISCO, and most of the DISCOs have similar, like I said, the standards are largely similar. Yes, there is the intention of somebody to move meters, but don't forget that these meters need to communicate with the back-end office of the distribution companies. And so for them to be able to, and you need to put that on the wall and connect it to a grid. So usually people will say, oh, I want to do it like the handset, for instance. I can buy my handset, I will just take a SIM and put. Yes, that is also possible, but you need to understand that we have to, when you use your phone, it's remote. But these electricity meters, you have to fix them, you have to connect them to a grid. And then when you do that, the DISCO will be able to read. And let me say something. As we sit today, a meter that is being used by most of the DISCOs are similar. But because each DISCO has some differences in the back-end office they use, the head-end systems that they use, there could be slight differences in some of the components of the meters or some of the requirements in the meter. But that does not affect supply.
When
it
you
doesn't
say
affect customers
the
at all.
smartphones and people can buy those smartphones and meters, are you saying that individuals can buy meters by themselves and install?
Not really. You need to understand. You see, the thing with the meters right now, there's a control, and the reason is simple, because you see the meters are they are not like just phones that you can buy. You can buy this. Of course, you can do a lot of reading. Remember, I said any meter that you are going to buy will need to communicate with the back-end system or back office system of the DISCO. And so that's the reason why we first of all need to control the kind of how many people or what kind of person can go and procure a meter. You have to procure something that can be used. If you bring in a meter, for instance, that cannot communicate with the system of the DISCO, then automatically you won't be able to use it.
So what if you give us the specification and people just get them and then...
Remember,
Pardon me, but if you specify and people get those specifications, that look, if you get anyone outside of these ones that we've specified, it won't work. What will be wrong with that? There's
nothing wrong with it. But the reason why we want to make sure that there's a control is that if today, you know the way, if you tell people, okay, just go and buy any meter you find, or you say you go to the DISCO and now say, okay, I want to buy XYZ meter, then the DISCO will tell you, okay, I need this type of meters that you need to go and buy so that it can work with my system. That can be done. But you see, there's need for control. The reason we are saying this is, you know, the system, we will get to a point whereby people can now say, okay, let me go and buy meters where I want. But please understand that the way utility works, especially the electricity utility, it is the responsibility of the DISCOs to provide meters, right? Now, when they do that, it's like it's an equipment you need to be able to operate efficiently, to know the energy somebody is consuming so that you'll be able to bill him properly and to be able to control your revenue. So in that regard, the DISCO has a responsibility to procure that meter. Now, the reason why today there is this argument about, oh, can I just enter any, why can't I buy, is because there were challenges with the DISCOs to provide meters to Nigerians. And so the commission, first of all, came up with the CAPME system, whereby if you want to buy meter, you can pay for it, and then the DISCO will now install that meter for you, and then you get paid back through energy.
Even though that didn't work for a lot of people.
That didn't work.
And
yes.
that program ended with people's money.
The commission stopped that because there was abuse. And then we came up with the MAP. The MAP clearly is to ensure that there is enough financing, because what we discover, the major, not the only problem though, of the DISCOs is to get enough financing to buy those meters and install for customers. Now, what we did was we came up with the MAP to help the DISCOs be able to get those meters. Now, when the MAP started, then these processes came in. But ideally, we are moving towards that. Remember, Mr. President promised 5 million meters, mass metering, as a matter of fact. Yeah. And we are working with CBN now to ensure that there's a bulk procurement process.
There are a number of issues. Could you tell us, what was the fundamental problem when you say the CAPME didn't work?
Okay. You see, the CAPME was intended for consumers who have, there was a yearning. First and foremost, no, we are coming, the DISCOs were privatized, or the current DISCOs were privatized in 2013. They had an obligation to provide meters to their customers. It's part of the performance agreements they signed. As a matter of fact, to provide 5 million meters within 5 years. Unfortunately, they couldn't do that. So the commission came up because there was yearning from consumers. We need meters and the rest. So the commission now said, okay, fine. If you have your money and you want to buy meters, okay, we will facilitate a process whereby you get the meter. You pay, the meters will be installed for you. Then you recover that money through energy credit when you vend over a certain period of time. And that process went on. But what happened was that consumers now go and pay because they needed the meters. And then the DISCOs, who are supposed to provide the meters, in some cases failed to provide those meters. So consumers paid money into your account and kept waiting.
So if that was the problem,
so we stopped it.
But now, it's still happening today, even as CAPME has ended. Okay,
let me tell you. So we stopped that, right? Then we came up with the MAP, the Meter Asset Provider Scheme. The intention of the MAP was there were certain good aspects of the CAPME, whereby we still allow, under the MAP, we still allow people to pay upfront. But there is also a provision for those who cannot pay upfront to be able to be given meters, and then they pay over a period of time through installments. Now, that process is what we call, you will now be paying through a monthly meter service charge. Right. Now, let me tell you something. You said the process. You see, in economics, there is demand and supply. Where there is scarcity of a thing, abuse is always there. And so when there is a scarcity, usually there will be opportunities for people. Let me give you an example. As we see today, we have situations whereby a DISCO and an MAP ask their customers that because we are still trying to resolve this issue of additional duty, we don't have meters to go on in. So please don't pay money. People go and still look for where is the account, let me pay money. Why? It's desperation because they needed it. But so those are the things that open up opportunities for abuse.
But using that analogy of the market, you know, demand and supply, and when there's scarcity, there might be abuse. You don't have a regulator in the market. You allow, you know, the freedom of the market to determine what happens, but there's a regulator. And you said earlier that they couldn't supply those meters for whatever reason. And I'm thinking, what was the repercussion, as it were? Because there's a regulator. If you had terms of agreement and you defaulted, there's meant to be a repercussion, as it were, and that's happening again. So I'm wondering, is there any repercussion?
I like the fact that you said when you have terms of agreement and there's a failure. Agreement is between two people. So when there's an agreement for you to do X, and for doing X, I will do X, and both parties fail to meet up with that agreement, then there's going to be an issue. And you, as a regulator, yes, because you see, at the point, and that's why today we are talking about there is need for people to pay the right price for electricity. At the inception
talking about that, my apologies.
Okay, let me answer. let me just very quickly. So what I'm saying is that if I am coming in as a business person. I said, okay, because utility business is regulated all over the world, especially the distribution end. Why? Because they are sort of monopoly. So you don't want to allow them to just do what they want to do. That's why regulation comes in. But there's also market that plays in there. So because you are now regulating me to say that I can only charge X, if my cost is more than the X, you as the person regulating, you must give me that X. Otherwise, it will affect me fulfilling some of those responsibilities. And that was the challenge that we had, whereby you have a disco who says that I have X amount of money that I need to be able to provide electricity. Then the regulator now looked at it and said, okay, this is the cost, we'll allow you. But the government feels that this amount of money is too much for my citizens to bear. And because it's too much, please just ask them to continue to pay this, then I will take care of this.
Well, you know, this is about
that
meters.
creates a lot of
because
distortion.
this is a separate one.
Yeah, this is about power, you know, the tariff. But you
yes,
know, we're talking about meters. So people paid for meters,
preceding.
and the discos could not fulfill that.
We've taken care of those ones.
So
for instance, those people who paid under the CAPMI, for instance, we've made sure that they've been metered. And
but some of them didn't get the money and didn't get the meters.
Now, if there's anybody, I was on a town hall meeting on Monday, right, with consumers and on this matter of metering. And I received calls from people, some saying, oh, up till now, because note that you are dealing until, as far as we are concerned as NERC, we've already asked all the discos that had issues that have not metered customers who paid under the CAPMI to get them metered.
You have already, you have instructed, my apologies, you have instructed the discos.
Yes.
How do you verify whether or not they have complied?
First and foremost.
So perhaps there should be a feedback conduit for the consumers who, you know, paid for meters and they have not gotten the meters and the discos have not reverted to them in any way. Is there a conduit from NERC to say, report these to us with certain information, how much you paid, your location, your disco, and then you can interface with the discos?
Yes,
on that?
of course. We have consumer complaints desk. And I just gave you an example. On Monday, I had a meeting, a town hall meeting, virtual town hall meeting with Nigerians. We had over 600 people on Zoom, and we have almost 2,000 on Facebook. And we got calls. Now, the feedback is that consumers always send if there are such issues. And we told them, I've received, if I show you my email now, you'll see people sending in complaints. And we are following up with the disc. For those cases, most of them, most of the issues were addressed. But that does not mean to say that 100% people who have paid under that system have gotten meters. But as far as the reports we got from the disco, it's 100% paid. I mean, they've been given meters. But because we have opened up channels of consumer complaints and we are now engaging with the customers to get to hear more, any of such complaints, we take it up with the disco. And in fact, I remember saying that for anybody who has paid his money for that long, he needs to get compensated. And so those are the things we are following up. Remember, you are dealing with human beings. Sometimes, let me give you an example. A disco came to us and said, we have this lodgement into our account, which we believe related to the CAPMI period. But all we have is just name. They've gone to the bank to find out how they could even get the phone number to be able to call those people. They couldn't, because they are trying to find out who are you and then where do you even reside. Because remember, people just go and pay in money. And
I think there are situations, but okay, we need to go to break. We'll come back and take a look at some of these complaints from people when we return in just a moment. Do stay with us. So I think they've turned this into another channel for that kind of consumer forum that I have, because there's so many town halls, so many questions that people have about metering. But in terms of the plan now to meter Nigerians to stop this estimated billing, I know that National Assembly has tried something to ensure that, look, if you keep billing people based on estimations, it will be criminalized if they haven't done it already. And the president has given that directive to ensure that that is done. So at the moment, what is NERC's position on stopping estimated billing?
Okay, thank you. You know, yes, there were issues so much issues with estimated billing, and the discos were not actually doing what they ought to do, and it was getting out of hand. Like you rightly stated, it got to a point whereby the National Assembly intervened, trying to criminalize it, although we had our issues with that. But the Commission, in order to stem that attitude of the discos giving outrageous estimated billing to customers, came up with what we call the capping regulation. And the intention of the capping is that while we are working to get consumers metered, discos cannot just arbitrarily estimate bills of customers. What we did is that we say for capping, we have to make sure that those with meters in maybe a DT transformer, or a feeder, those with meter in that area are being charged and paid appropriately. We use their average bill to ensure that that is the maximum cap a disco can now charge for anybody who is not metered in that area.
How do consumers know this?
The consumers know because first and foremost, before we came out with the regulation, usually our regulations, we go to meetings, we do hearings, we listen to people's comments and then their feedback. And it is in the process of that, we will now come up with our regulation. And when we came out with the regulation, we also notified people. The caps per the feeders and the locations where you stay are there on our website, because for each disco, we ask them to give us the data for each of those locations. So, for instance, if you're in Abuja, in Maitama, there are feeders there. For those people on those feeders, this is the cap. This is your average cap, meaning that this is what the maximum a disco can charge you. Somebody called on Monday, like I told you, when we were having a virtual, and he said he went to the disco and now showed them that this is my cap based on what NERC says. So you cannot charge me more than this. This is the maximum you can charge. Now, that is a consumer that got that information. So it's not as if consumers are not.
That's
so
here in Abuja?
The capping, no, it's in Lagos.
Okay.
The capping order is in place. It came out in February this year, and it's in place. Now, what the capping order does is that we want to try to ensure that you are not paying more than your neighbor. In a nutshell, it's not a perfect system, but what we are saying is that if people with meter in that area are paying an average of, or spending an average energy of 200 kilowatt hour in a month, what we are saying is that you that don't have meter, it may, your house may be different and the rest of them, but you shouldn't pay more than 200 kilowatt hour in a month. At least that stops the issue of, oh, okay, 3 of you have meters, and then on this distribution transformer, I have given so much energy, and so I remove what you have, and the difference I share it across people. That's the reason why people keep getting 20,000, 30,000, and next month it could change to 14,000 depending on the difference. So the adjustment. So this restriction now, notwithstanding how much energy you have delivered to that transformer, if the cap that those without meters, if that cap can never be exceeded, the difference is now your problem, because as a disco, you now have a responsibility to either go and meter. Because remember, the intention of the cap is not to make them comfortable, it's to make them to go and meter. Okay. So that's the purpose, and the capping is there to make sure that outrageous bills are stemmed.
Talking about meters again, forgive me, pardon me for taking
that's
you
why
back
we're
there.
here.
On your website, before the increment, the electricity tariff increase, on the website of NERC, there were certain conditions listed that must be fulfilled or complied with before electricity tariff increase was activated. One of them was customers, for instance, let me read, customers are consulted, by the discos based on hours of supply. Customers are metered. No estimated billings through the strict enforcement of the capping regulation that you have just talked about. This is the statement on your website. These, first of all, I don't know if you put a poll out there now, I don't know how many customers of these discos will tell you that they were consulted by their discos before the tariff increase. And of course, We're still talking about meters not being available, yet the electricity tariff has been increased. What happened?
Now you said consulted. You know, what happened was that in February and March this year, NERC went round the country to listen to customers and consumers. Why? Because we received application from the discos for what is called extraordinary tariff review. They wanted to increase tariff. And the way the system works for regulated business is that you can't just go and increase tariff. We have to find out what is the reason. And it's not only the commission, it's the consumers, the public, those who you are serving. They will need to come and vet. They will need to come and verify what you are saying. And so we went all over the country. Each disco makes a presentation to their consumers, and questions were being asked. Oh, okay, you want to increase. Why? I don't have light. All kinds of complaints. Now, if you observed, what we came out with is called service-based tariff, which was different from the cost-reflective tariff we used to talk about. The reason was simple. When we went round, consumers said that if I can get light, yes, I'll be ready to pay for it. But I cannot just sit down and then there will be arbitrary increase and I don't get the light. So we came back and said, okay, based on this feedback from customers, we cannot just sit down and say, let's do cost-reflective tariff. R2, you pay X. R3, you pay that. We said, no, let's look at it based on the service because they want to get the service. And that was why we came out. So the consultation, the consultation was done at that point in time. Remember, please, don't misunderstand consultation with agreement. It didn't say you will customers will agree because it's a different process entirely.
So you just tell them. So whatever you
no.
But isn't
just
that
tell them. Consult.
Yeah.
That's what it is. Yeah. Now, just listen. When we say consult, that I just gave you a reason why we had to even change the process. That is not just, oh, take it or leave it. No, we listen. Because you see...
Well, you don't have to agree.
When you meet people, listen. When you meet people and say, you are probably a married person. You wake up in your house in the morning and you have 3 kids. One is saying, Daddy, let's go to Ijabimo. The other is saying, no, I want to sleep at home. The other is saying, let's go to the pool or somewhere. You have 3, 4 different people arguing. You as a dad, you have a responsibility to make a decision.
Don't forget,
and that decision will be for the benefit of all.
They're not paying for meters. They're not
paying for the pool.
They're not paying for any of those things.
So please, it's a consultation.
Answer the second one. The meters have not been, you said customers are metered. It's on the website of NERC.
No, customers, read it.
Customers are metered is one of the conditions that NERC gave before the tariff increase was supposed to be effected. It's on your website. No,
then there's a cap inside. You see, look, you are just reading, you just picked out customers are metered. There is a cap inside because we know. I just told you now, we have over 6 million people unmetered. And so what the capping is saying is that if you are not metered, it's going to be capped. Remember the increase in tariffs, sir. It wasn't even done everything. Mr. President said that, okay, go please, but make sure that the people who are, for instance, not poor and the rest are not affected by this. It's a policy guidance that was given to the community. We have a responsibility to fix the tariff. So we came and said, okay, based on this, please, those who are getting these services should pay for it. But if you happen to find yourself where probably you are in a band B and you are getting up to 20 hours of electricity, it does not mean that you will just pay anything. Your bill is also capped while we now try to get meters to you. So if you read it, it didn't just stop with, it must be, it talks about, yes, metering, just to emphasize the fact that metering is the key goal. But there's a capping side of it, whereby we'll make sure that you are not shortchanged until that meter is but we cannot sit down today and say, oh, until everybody is metered before we now go and review tariff. Remember, with every day that passes, you keep incurring cost and the rest of it.
How often do you sanction discos?
There's nothing like how often. It's every day if there's need for it. What we do is that there's a process
when was
of
the last?
sanctioning.
When was the last time?
Sanctioning. We've been sanctioning discos on so many occasions. We have cases whereby there was a health issue, safety issue in Abuja, for instance, where a little child died, playing with one of the electric equipments of Abuja disco, and we fined them. We gave them to pay, I think it was about 200 million and 50 million compensation for the family. But they went to court. They went to court, and we have the case in court today. But that's just to tell you that, yes, we sanction. We definitely.
Do you also sanction based on defaulting terms of agreement? So, for example, I believe NERC is saying that meters need to be supplied in 10 days or thereabout. I think that's... So imagine a disco default. Will there be a sanction?
There will be a sanction. And in my last town hall meeting, I even said that anybody who has a complaint whereby he has paid and has not been metered within 10 days, let's get to know.
What's the consequence?
Now what happened is that under the MAP regulation, if you pay, if you apply to get a meter, the responsibility of the disco is to first go and check your house to be sure it's meter ready, meaning that the cabling and everything is okay for meters to be installed there. That is one. When that is done, they do site visits. Yeah. When that is done, they now ask you to pay on the understanding that the MAP has meters already on ground for them to be able to be metered. And that was why we came up with that regulation that within 10 days, when you pay, and we try to avoid what was happening during the CAPMI days, don't pay. Don't tell any customer to pay when you are sure you are not ready to give him. The moment he pays, he will start counting his 10 days. Now, what happened? There were cases, we got calls or cases, whereby people paid and they waited, some even 2 months right now. And what was the reason? We put the MAPs to answer. Okay. Now, what happened was that because of this disruption in the supply chain, you make plans, okay, I will get so quantity in, I'll be able to meter. Some went and paid. Unfortunately, this issue of delays in clearing and the rest of them came. So it affected. But for those ones who have paid, we have given instruction for them to be metered now.
Okay. Is that the consequence? What's the consequence?
The consequence is
of default by the discos.
The consequence is because the responsibility of metering after payment is actually that of the MAP. Yes, of course, they work for the discos, and we are going to sanction for those cases that we've identified. The amount of money, because you've paid your money and it's sitting down, somebody somewhere is benefiting from that money. And for each of those cases, so that's why I'm saying, it's not like if you have a case that is verified, you paid, and then you've not been metered, we'll find a way for the disco and the MAP to compensate you, whether through energy credit also. Okay,
so both the disco and the MAP will compensate the consumer that paid after 10 days.
There was a response from one of the MAPs that, look, when consumers pay this money, that it doesn't get to them until they meter them because there's
so who did they pay to
an account? No, there's an account that is created between that's have a dual responsibility. Yes, whereby that money will not be touched until a fulfillment of certain.
Who are the signatories? Both the discos and the
MAPs. Yes. So what happens? So the argument is that while the money sits there, somebody else is using that money or getting something, and for that purpose, that person is going to. So it's good. That's why I said both the MAP and the disco will be responsible for that.
We've talked about the MAPs that import. Now there are reports also in the media about those they call local manufacturers of meters. They say that if we just leave it open-ended for importation, it doesn't encourage local production. What does that mean, and how do you intervene to help them?
Very good. Now let me say that we have manufacturers and assemblers of meters in Nigeria. As we speak, we have about 8 or 9 of them, and out of that, about 5 of them, by the way, are MAPs. But anyway, we have manufacturers today that are producing meter. The MAP regulation was actually, first and foremost, there was a portion of the regulation that talks about local content, meaning that for any MAP that has been given a contract to supply meter to a disco, 30% of that must come from a local manufacturer or must be sourced locally. So that is to make sure that the local manufacturers are taken care of. Now, we talked about Mr. President's directive for mass metering. As we sit today, the decision of the government is that this mass metering that is coming on and which CBN is actually supporting is strictly taking care of, is going to be strictly for local meter manufacturers. The intention is that, the government has a policy to ensure that local manufacturers actually are encouraged and their capacity is built, as well as creating job employments for Nigerians. So what has happened is that with this mass metering now, which is the bulk part of it, local manufacturers are the ones that are going to produce these meters. CBN and NERC and Ministry of Power, Ministry of Finance, and the Office of the Vice President are actually working in a process whereby these local manufacturers will come and bid competitively for the production of these mass meters on behalf of the discos. We've already gotten the requirements of the discos, the kind of meters they need.
Yeah, but the discos, I'm seeing some of their messages now saying that, look, this MOF, NERC, WB, World Bank, all of this bulk purchase will lead to purchase of substandard meters. Some of them are saying now that they've even advised NERC that this is supposed to be the sole responsibility of the discos, and if you allow it to go this way, you just might get substandard meters that they can't get out of.
Okay, let me explain. I just told you now, there's going to be a project monitoring unit that will involve the discos. I just gave you an example that as we sit today, we've gotten the requirements of the discos for the type of meters they need, the quality of meters they need, and the quantity of meters they need, and their deployment plans for the next 18 to 24 months. Now, what the government is saying is that we are not just going to sit down and say, XYZ give us meter. No. The discos, who has the responsibility to meter, is their responsibility. It has not changed. They have a responsibility. If a disco said I need 250,000 meters.
Yeah.
In this procurement process, I need 250 meters, this specs, this quality, and the rest of. And it is on the basis of that that the production will be made. So there is nothing like somebody is coming in with a substandard.
If it's their responsibility, pardon me, why is it that these other groups have got to come in to,
which other group?
Because these groups are saying this is their own sole responsibility. From their message, I get the sense that they feel it's being taken off them.
By who?
By different groups who are now going to be importing those meters.
No.
The discos bringing them in themselves.
Please, let me explain. You are trying to mix two things together. Importation is different from production, the mass production that we're talking about. Now, I explained to you what we are trying to do to take advantage of Mr. President's 1-year deferment of the 35% levy. And we are using the MAPs as it were today, because they are the ones that have those contracts and the rest of them, to import as much while they use additional local production. That is the phase 0 or phase 1. So the first is the MAPs.
The MAPs are
yes. So that's why I was saying is probably between 1 and 1.5 million. But the mass production, you just quoted 5 million. Anyway, I don't know where you got 5 million, but the mass production.
That's from the ministry. If you check it, it's online. It's everywhere.
Okay. What right now we are working with is that we've gotten the requirements of the discos. And so the intention is that based on this, how much will this cost so that CBN will be able to provide funding?
So this way is it
so
MAP?
This one is not MAP. This one is not MAP. I said the intention of the government is to use local meter manufacturers and assemblers. So this process now is no longer, because the MAPs, except if you are an MAP who is already a manufacturer or who plans to be a manufacturer. So this is no longer, is not an MAP thing. Because the government wants to encourage local meter business owners and to encourage employment, this mass metering process is going to be theirs. But it's not going to be done from out of the exclusion of the discos.
Right.
They are the ones that, as a matter of fact, they are the ones procuring. So what the government is just trying to do is that, okay, you don't have money to procure this thing. I will bring in funding. But this funding that I'm going to do, I will use meter manufacturer. Tell me, what is the quantity you want? What is the quality you want? Meter manufacturer, produce this thing. for Disco X.
You know, I think the consistent part.
So the discos will be involved all the way through.
Yeah.
So there is nothing that will be done without the discourse consent.
Okay.
By the way, you know that this funding is given to them to procure meters. So it's not like it's a dash coming from somewhere.
The consistent part in this is the NERC.
Yes.
Because whether it's the MAPs or the local manufacturers,
Yes.
you will play an active role in ensuring that, you know, the regulations are followed to the letter. And as you go back to the role of NERC, now the new plan is people that have power for above 12 hours, 20 hours will pay more tariff, right? And a lot of people are asking, in fact, our Twitter handle is literally being spammed right now with a lot of questions. And they're thinking, so what happens when, yes, I used to get 12 hours, or at least some days I get 12 hours. Now I'm paying more tariff. But what happens on days that I get below 12 hours, or days that I don't even get power at all? Will there be some compensation? Will there be some sanction, maybe?
Will the bill drop?
What happens then?
There will be a compensation. Let me not just, because there's in the regulation it clearly states that first, if a disco places you, remember, the way we arrive at the current service level is based on current infrastructure that the discos have. They came and say, oh, for this area, I'll be able to give them X number of hours. So on the basis of that, you can charge X. Now, what we have said is that if you are not able to provide that number of hours, remember it's an average over a month.
Yeah.
If you are not able to provide that number of hours, we said in our regulation that you report to us within 60 days, we will investigate and make sure that you get compensated. However, the Commission is also deploying monitoring system to ensure that it's not just we wait until a consumer now says, oh, I didn't get 18 hours and these people are just, we'll be able to verify. We'll be able to verify. We'll be able to verify. The reason why we gave the 60 days is because the monitoring equipments and that we are going to use, some of them have not come in. So we have a system of
you're
checking
getting
that
your
manually.
data from the discos?
Or yourself?
No, the data, yes, right now we're getting the data from the discos and we're encouraging consumers.
So what did they give you false details?
No, listen now, listen. You know, you say, we've started the service-based tariff, right? And in our regulation, we said, for consumers who have issues, we will handle those issues within 60 days. That's what we said in the regulation. But what I'm saying is that what we are moving towards is, right now, because the monitoring that we are doing is based on the information we get from the disco, that is not sufficient. And because we are not going to just rely on that, that's why I said there's an independent monitoring that we are doing. And we are deploying equipments right now. As a matter of fact, I think in Ikeja and in Lagos, we have deployed some monitoring equipments whereby we get independent data.
How do people reach that? Because there's a lot of complaint about Ikeja Disco particularly. How do they get across so they can complain directly to that independent?
Okay, first and foremost, NERC website will have a complaint email that you can send an email. We have phones, and then those discourse as well do. Today, as we speak,
so on that NERC feedback that you just talked about, right here on Twitter, a number of people are saying it's not real time and they don't get the feedback on time, which is why I asked the other time, how does NERC get real-time information, you know, that they can relate with, even if all they do is just forward that message from the consumer to somebody responsible for that at any of the discos? They will be able to attend it.
I just told you, we had a virtual town hall on Monday. Yesterday alone, I have responded, and I'm sure the customers, probably they are hearing me now, they will tell you that Commissioner Nathan has responded to tell me that I'm following up with the disco.
I've seen some of your responses. I personally sent a mail. I didn't get a response. In fact, I copied almost everybody. I had to copy myself again. That was about a month or more ago.
Okay.
But you know, I need to quickly sneak this in.
So that's how fast it is. A month, no response.
So maybe things are changing. But I need to quickly sneak this in.
You know, I just told you I had 2 town hall meetings because we want to get what people. Yes, there could be things that were not done right. But we are trying to make sure that, especially with this service-based tariff, we listen to people, we try to make sure we follow up with the discourse so that they will do what they ought to do. And I'm telling you, this will continue to improve as we go along.
I need to get your thoughts on this. Yes. Labour has been saying there needs to be a reversal in this tariff hike. And they said that ever since we privatized this sector for 400 billion, the government has spent so much on it. There's talk about recapitalization and what have you. Do you think it's feasible, Labour's demand asking for a reversal?
You see, I'm not here to talk about Labour. Labour is talking with the federal government. NERC has a responsibility to regulate the industry, to fix tariff. Now, if the federal government feels the argument of Labour will require that decision for us to reverse our decision, that we won't, but there are consequences to whatever decision that is being taken. Because when you reverse, there's a cost to it.
So what
and that is what we told the government, that whatever thing that is being done, any day you delay for Nigerians to pay the right cost of electricity, somebody else must pay for the differential of the cost. And government has been picking that. And government is now saying, I don't have money any longer. And that was the reason why government is now saying, look, I can't pay this thing. Just go and do whatever thing the law says you should go and do. And for us, we have done that. Now, if the Labour is saying it must be reversed, that is not NERC's decision. It's a policy decision of government. And I'm sure with the negotiation I had this morning, they are even having a meeting. There will be a compromise between the Labour and the government on that.
Well, clearly, I think one key thing is people they want to see the feedback mechanisms improved, the response time improved, because we see a lot of frustration in terms of people can't get, and they don't feel comfortable complaining to the discos who are the cause of their problems in the first place. So they just feel they need a third party to wade into some of these things. But as you say, that engagement will continue, and we hope that they all can get across to the website and take advantage of some of those platforms. If not,
and send email. You can send email to me. Nathan.
I'll send it again.
Yeah, at nerc.gov.ng.
All right, so there you go. That's Nathan Shati, Commissioner Finance and Management Services of NEC. Well, we didn't do a lot of finance, but thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you.
We're back in a moment. Join us again. Well, the quest for credible, fair elections, well, I think we could use that phrase again, is unending, because people always wonder. They think if you get that right, we just might have, to a large extent, sorted our leadership recruitment process, which in turn will impact on the quality of service and leadership that you may get out there eventually. But having seen the way those state elections turned out, there are still some concerns and issues that people want improved. So we've got two gentlemen joining us today. We've got Dr. Yunus Atanko, who is the Head Public Affairs Bureau of NC Front. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you very much for having me. Good morning, Nigerians. Well,
you'll also be joined by Monday Obani, who is a former second vice president of the MBA, legal practitioner, of course. Thank you as well for joining us today. Okay, let me start from here. You were right there at the elections. You saw the equipment, materials, the operationalization of some of those policies, both by INEC and by security, and ultimately how the elections turned out. What were your takeaway?
Okay, first of all, we must understand the context in which we were there in the first place. Our intention was just to add value and look at the processes of the election. Just like as you rightly said, that people are looking for credible leaders, so that, and the will of the people prevailing at polling stations, and making sure that the quality of our democracy is something that everybody is happy with. And one way or the other, we will say we are happy. So the NCF turned out about 600 observers. You remember, the NCF was made up of technocrats, you know, politicians, some of them academicians, journalists, and everybody who are concerned about the quality of our democracy. So at the end of it all, what we did was to look at the totality of what happened. And that's where we are so happy with some of the action that INEC took. You remember there was so much hype as regard to the issue of it. One would have thought that if you get to Edo, what you see is going flying everywhere. And at a point in time, the election itself was almost suspended because people were thinking that it may not take place. But at the end of it all, the zeal and the determination of the Edo people reigned supreme. And we must commend it, even though the turnout, as expected, we are expecting to have about 2 million voters as registered. What we ended up happening was about 550,000 voting that took place, which represented almost 1/3 of the total numbers of the expected people that came
What do you think was the reason from what you heard?
There was a lot of scare. There was a lot of scare, a lot of people were tired, and there was this confusion right from the beginning of the issue between the governor and then the former chairman of the party. And at the same time, people were doubtful that would even their vote count. And now that result has turned out to see that, yes, the vote can't count. If we put ourselves together to work as a people, it can count. And that is the result of what INEC did with this, their Z-Pad innovation, which, of course, unfortunately, they didn't use it to the fullest, but it captured the result sheet from ECA 8.
That's the one part of the function of the Z-Pad.
Yes, that's
what was the second that they didn't use fully?
It was supposed to capture pictures and more or less like an addition to the accreditation system. And even when you are voting, usually when you are voting, you'll be seeing the result coming in almost instantly. You know, so it will have taken it. Anyway, one way or the other, it has taken care of this particular cantankerous collation center where voting has been collated different from what the people really vote, and then that for us now give us. For me, it's a big takeaway. That it shows that there is a possibility of us having credible, free, and fair election, and the vote of the common man can count.
Well, Mr. Bani, you have also been at several elections. You've told us several times you've seen how some of these things actually happen. So in this particular context, in terms of getting it better, improving from what we just saw, what do you think?
Yeah, thank you, Chamberlain. I want to say this. I am clearly elected, but then my election has a timeline. It is just a singular incident in which the mandate of the people seem to have counted, even though all of us are excited. But that excitement, I also warn that people should exercise it with caution, because of the fact that if this thing continues, then we can now begin to rejoice and clap our hands for the electoral umpire. But being a singular incident, we need to study what actually happened and begin to build on what had happened in Edo in order to get our electoral process that will actually begin to wear the toga of credibility, which is what Mr. Tanko is saying. The issue of leadership in Nigeria is key. And all of us should not stay aloof. If we want to get a country that is actually working and functional, we must get involved. What I saw in Edo actually is the issue of citizenship participation. We are very critical in the credibility of the electoral process. I saw incidences where citizens arrested some people that wanted to mar the electoral process. I saw, people. A lawyer was in one of the videos that I saw arrested when he was trying to share money. And I saw a situation also where some people that wanted to cause some mayhem at the polling unit were beaten up by the citizens who were clearly alert. So what really counted for electoral process or unfairness of the Saturday's incident in Edo is actually several factors, one of which is the participation of the people in ensuring that they must begin to have a country that is working for them. We must begin to enthrone leadership that will begin to get a country that all of us shall be proud of. Because if our generation that are not yet born, come up, what would be the question that we ask? What were you doing that you were not able to get an electoral process right for yourself, enthroning leadership that will make our own state that are coming up to be clearly stable. So I think that issue of realization by the citizen is what really counts, is one of the factors that counted. There are so many other factors. The neutrality of the security agencies and even the electoral empire, played a very key role, very important. And finally, you may not agree with me on this, APC fought against APC in that election too. So we must take that into consideration. That were the inner fight, the inner caucus fight between APC. So it was APC against APC, really, most of the things that happened in that Edo incident. That's why I said that we should be a bit more cautious in rejoicing over this electoral process in Edo, because there are many factors that we need to bring into consideration to come to that conclusion that election was really free and fair.
Right. Let's come back to the studio now. He has brought up an interesting dimension.
That's right.
I mean, that's the party side.
That's right.
Saying it was one party against itself. But the NC front, you brought out a report after the election, and you spoke about some issues. Yes, you sounded like him. You were optimistic about it, but it was cautious. What other things did you find out in that election?
Well, we understand that there was an issue as regard to some skirmishes of challenges with regard to violence, and then INEC staff not really coming out on time, but they were quickly able to take care of the challenges as it were. So that helped in building confidence within the electorate and INEC as it were. Then the issue that he mentioned with regard to whether APC or fighting against APC, one will really want to look at it from that context at the same time. But remember, the people now decided on the character of the person, the particular person. That it was the person that they voted for, determine actually whichever party he goes to, they are ready to go with him at the end of the result. So for me, I looked at it at that angle too, but I just give kudos to the people for deciding and staying firm on their decision. So meaning that if Obaseki or any other person that they wanted went to another political party and contest, they will vote for him.
What about
and that to us is what we want in this country, to see clearly the people vote for individual who they want. Whether the person has done them right or wrong, that is the person that they wanted.
But that statement you put out talked about vote buying.
Yes.
It also referenced it.
Yes.
What did you find out?
Well, before the pre-election, there was signs of vote buying. We saw it when people have been given wrappers and the rest of it and all. You know, despite that, those who are giving them these wrappers and money, they still voted for the person that they wanted. So that will start standing warning to politicians who feel that probably they can buy people over. Once the minds of the people is made up, and then the electoral umpire provided the enabling environment for that particular vote to count, I think people will start running away from attempting to buy people's vote.
Well, let me take this back to Sobani. There were pockets of occurrences, just as Mr. Tanko has also just said now. The concern that's been on over time is, it seems whenever we have issues of electoral violence at whatever level, it doesn't get, there are no consequences to it, so to speak. For this Edo election, everyone is saying it's free, fair, credible, and all of that. But then there were pockets of violence. The challenge has been that of consequences, so that we nip it in the bud permanently. What do you think?
Yes, I think there was this particular recommendation that was made. I think I was under the former president, where it was recommended that a different body that we do deal with the issue of punishment of electoral offenders should be established. The commission that will actually deal with it, with a special court that actually should be in charge of ensuring that those who commit electoral offenses are dealt with. That particular recommendation has never been implemented. I agree with you. People get away with offenses and because of the fact that there's no punishment. The moment the country makes up its mind that, look, we must begin to ensure that our electoral process is clearly free, fair, and those who want to interfere in the process will be dealt with. I tell you that we begin to have people that will become careful during the election time in Nigeria. Remember that America and the UK had to also warn that those politicians who have houses in their countries may not be given visa. If they do anything that they consider silly in the electoral process in Edo. And that, again, people are saying is one of the reasons why we had something that looked like a peaceful electoral process in Edo, that those political elites do not want to miss going to those countries if they misbehave, because that is the promise that those countries made if we misbehave in the electoral process. So it counted. So I have always taken time to speak about issue of desperation of politicians. And I have said it here that we must deal with it. I agree that this election has some level of electronics, issue of transmission of electoral results, from the polling unit to the web, to the site of INEC, which was also clearly something commendable. But go and study now. The politicians are trying to know what happened in Edo. Go and find out. They will try to know what happened in Edo, and they may try to begin to violate this process if INEC does not up their game. They were taken by surprise that this election in Edo has turned out to be a bit free and fair. And so what they would now do, the politicians, just mark my word, if they want to know what are the things that were done rightly by INEC in order to get this electoral process that we have now considered credible, right. So what would they want to do now to violate it in future elections? So INEC must up their game. we must involve electronic issue of, bringing issue of internet into the system. Just that what we do in Nigerian Bar Association. The last election in Nigerian Bar Association, like the lawyers were watching the result live. As people were voting, people were monitoring the result that were coming in. So I thought that INEC would implement. I heard that INEC was even planning towards that direction, but it didn't work out, even though there is no law backing it. But it's important that we really involve.
Now, just one moment, just some of the things that you just talked about now. I mean, Timberland is just trying to point it out to you. Have to do with the laws. Okay, is that if the laws do not permit some things to happen, I don't see how those things can happen. So, well, that's on the one hand. But the other thing is, earlier you spoke about a number of things that were responsible for what we had and that we needed to have cautious optimism. You've already started on the issue of the consequences of electoral violence. And you have also begun to point out some of the things that the politicians might begin to do now to undermine the process of INEC. What are those other things that we need to pay attention to?
So many other things. I said it in your television several times. Like, look, as a nation, the reward system is so much. Anyone who becomes a governor, all of a sudden, the moment he comes in, 1, 2 or 2 months, he becomes a multi-millionaire because of the easy access to the treasury. We don't have, it's only in Nigeria we have such a system where the institutions are not strong enough to checkmate people who are elected into public office. So we must begin to build a system where there is checks and balance. Checks and balances is very key. So that any governor that comes in, any local government chairman, any president that comes in, the institutions that the Constitution has actually given the power to checkmate them are doing the right thing by checkmating them so that they don't have access to treasury. And when they don't have access to treasury, I tell you that the people that will make this country to be what we want the country to be will begin to emerge, those who are coming for service. But now we're having a situation where somebody becomes a political elite and elected into public office. He is already made man because the system is so large. So we must begin to tackle that aspect. If we tackle it, I tell you that there will be so much desperation in getting into public office. So there won't be issue of manipulation, there won't be issue of killing, there won't be issue of balance snatching, that if you're thuggery, which is always what we have noticed in our electoral process. So I'm saying, in addition to what we have experienced in Edo, which is issue of deployment of electronic system in electoral process, which even though we believe very soon that a law will be made, sign into law. I mean, the president will sign into law the new reforms that are being put in place by the National Assembly. We must also deal with the political culture of access to treasury. If we deal with it together, electoral process, issue of political culture, of easy access, clearly we have a country, we begin to now have a system that...
All right, Mr. Bani, we'll come back to you in a bit. But let me ask Mr. Taku here, while there, what did INEC deploy for when you go there with your card? You read your card with the card reader, and those details don't pop up. What mechanisms were there to ensure or to checkmate those who perhaps may have warehouse card readers to use and vote on the day?
A simple thing. Once the card reader does not read your card, you don't vote. Because I was observing at the airport polling station, and I noticed some cards were almost like being torn off, and then some of them were being kept in such a way that it almost damaged the card. So when they inserted it, quite all right, the name and probably the visual of the individual is reading on the register as it were manually, but the card did not read those ones, but it read virtually almost 90% of the people who came into ready to vote. So, but once there was 2 complaints that I had, and that guy was saying that okay, the card did not read it, and I now noticed that his card was almost like there was attempt to meddle with the card. So INEC staff said that anybody card that did not read with the card reader being kept aside, he did not, because that the accreditation has to match with the total number of.
And earlier what they did was the incident form.
Yes,
that there were challenges. You go with the incident form, then you vote.
Yes.
Then they took that away.
Yes.
But now you're saying that without this incident form, you just don't vote.
You don't vote.
But what do people say if they say, look, it's not my fault that your card reader isn't working? Why should I pay?
But the truth is about that 90% of the other people's cards were reading.
Yeah, that could happen.
And then because challenges were that possibly there was accusation or assumption that some cards were being manipulated. So if you allow such to happen, then other people can bring in their card and manipulate the system. And once the card reader does not agree with the total number of votes, then there's problem. So INEC have to be careful as regard to ensuring that the card reader total number read accordingly to the total number of votes, so that there will be a kind of a synergy within the numbers. So that was exactly what happened.
Right.
But permit me to add to Rani's position as regard to what we need to do. Right now, the National Assembly is calling for submission of memorandum with regard to reforms and electoral reform and all. We need to take that opportunity now. People must come out and submit memorandum to the National Assembly to take up the areas that are hurting us most. Issue of funding, issue of movement from one political party to another. Today, in this 1 hour, you are belonging to one political party. In the next 1 hour, you belong to another person. That should change the system. From the person who has already been in that political party for years, counting numbers that, okay, probably his turn. There's somebody who just come within 1 hour and take over that particular ticket from him. That causes a lot of problem. So, and then we need to ensure that the system itself, INEC, unbundling of INEC is key. INEC is overburdened seriously.
But when you talk about the switching parties last minute, did that cause an issue during the Edo election?
No, in this Edo election, it did not. It did not, because people were interested in a particular candidate and they are looking out for him to go to any other political party where he can run.
If that favored the people,
yes, because one thing you ought to know is that if there's no agreement within the party, because that's where the internal party problem started, if there's no agreement within the party and understanding, it could lead to litigation. And the end of it, or all of this will end up being an exercise in futility.
But that would be the responsibility of the political parties.
Exactly. But when the law gives them room to manipulate the system, it gives them room to do whatever they want to do. And then there will not be cohesiveness and agreement. You will agree with me.
Do you see any chance of any change being done to this one that we're talking about now, given that it's the same National Assembly, the same system, the same political parties produce members of this National Assembly?
And you know, most of the decisions that have been made at the in making laws by our lawmakers, they always make laws that will suit their present interests, not looking at the futuristic effect of that particular situation. I mean, take a look at the situation. I give you a simple
Some of them might disagree with you.
Yes, they will, of course, but this is the fact. At a particular point in time, the political party, some people will disagree. The political party were given seed money to function in terms of logistics and all. Many other political parties who were in position at that time refused that at the National Assembly. In fact, they removed it from the Electoral Act. Eventually, that political party lost power. It came back to us in the circle and started agitating for funding. You can see. So what makes it that you not think very well before you make that particular decision? So many other things like that too is happening at the moment now. We must really take up this particular issue before another law is being sent to us that will be damaging and draw us back.
We're winding down now, but let me ask Mr. Bani, what do you suggest we do about strengthening internal democracy in political parties?
Very key, and that is actually what Mr. Tanko seemed to be saying. We should ensure that there is also fairness of the entire process, during the primaries in some of the political parties. If that fairness is not there, what Mr. Tanko is trying to probably now work against will always be there. People will make a last-minute move in order to join a political party that has structure. That is what Obaseki did. You can imagine if Obaseki does not have PDP, that was actually waiting in the wings in order to accept him, in order to actualize his political ambition of 4+4. He would have probably, not been re-elected today as a governor. So that issue that Mr. Tanko is stressing, in as much as I see some point he's trying to make, is clearly an internal thing. The political parties have their internal constitution that actually makes provision for accepting any person at the last minute, especially somebody that has somebody like Obaseki that is coming, who is the sitting governor. You want to have a sitting governor to run as a political aspirant in your political party because one, he has the strong, he has everything in his favor. So trying to stop that may not necessarily be acceptable to the political elites who are in National Assembly. So, Chamberlain, to answer your question, we should also, as we are looking at the national elections, we must also look at the elections in political parties. The issue of creating fairness and equity, and ensure that the electoral process at the primary level in the political parties are fair is very, very important for us. Because if we get it right, then we now begin to also to get the national election right. And most of the solutions that I've made today is that we must build on what INEC has done in Edo. I want to see it repeated in Ondo. I mean, in terms of fairness and all that. And I want to see it repeated in subsequent elections where other states are involved at the same time before we begin to clap for INEC. You know, clapping for INEC with this singular incident in Edo, I want us to be a bit circumspect. We want us to be a bit circumspect because it is building upon it and seeing it being repeated in all that time. Then we can now say that we have gotten it right, you know. But in addition to what INEC is going to
just
do, let's
quickly,
also address
on a final note,
yes.
I haven't quite gotten a closure on this issue of voter inducement, vote buying. I mean, you see reports of people being paid 1,000 naira to 15,000 naira just to vote for a political party. There are laws, quite all right, that seem to criminalize that, but it appears as though, I mean, they didn't get the memo. So how do we strengthen that area? Because it's a big deal.
I don't know whether you can stop it. I'm talking about vote buying in Nigeria because of the level of poverty. But what I think is the people's participation. What Nigerians have learned, even in the last election, I understood is that they collected the money and then made up their mind that they have a candidate they want to vote for. I don't know whether law can stop it, whether we can even implement our law. So the culture we should be emphasizing now, if we cannot implement our law, is to tell Nigerians that don't sell your conscience because of whatever you are getting. That if these guys are coming to induce you with whatever they want to induce you with, collect it and see the right thing by voting the right candidate that will ever change their fortunes in the state. That is my own
says he saw.
I don't know
so that may be what may happen eventually moving forward. Well, Mr. Bani, I'm afraid we need to let it go at that point. We do thank you for your thoughts this morning. Mr. Monday Bani is the former second vice president of the NBA. We've also had Dr. Yunus Tanko, who is the head Public Affairs Bureau of NC Front. Thank you for your time as well.
Thank you very much for having me. God bless Nigeria.
Let's just quickly take a look at some of the messages coming through from the viewers. We've got this tweet from Sultanisa, who was talking and who's responding to part of what he heard in the last hour about the electricity and metering. He says, capping order for people in Maitama, Asokoro. The most exploited are in suburbs that do not see light and pay based on estimated billing system.
Well, next one is from Agoa Benedict. In June, my estimated bill was 8,000 naira. 16,000 naira in July, that's times 2. And 21,000 naira in August. 16,000 times 4 flats in the house, that's 64,000 naira. I don't know what NERC is doing, he ends by saying.
This is definitely like mathematics on top of this matter. Ezekiel Ibidapo says, I was affected by the exchange rate fluctuation and paid more for my meter. I'm still awaiting the meter since payment in February. I share a meter but received the bill last month of 30,000 naira for the new account for which we are yet to be metered.
What do you call that? Postpaid billing?
Well, Ishola Fagbonda is not smiling either. He's trying to tell Mr. Shatti that NERC did not come to Ekiti State. NERC does not even have an office in Ekiti State. Bring your road show to Ekiti, he says.
Badong Joshua says, it's only in Nigeria that communities and villages come together to get poles, buy wires with all accessories, and even connect light. The discos will start bringing outrageous bills, and someone should ask the NERC representative who is to give light to communities.
Well, some might say communities are subjective there. This one is from Tedisco. It says, well, okay, no, this one is from, well, I don't know who it is, no name here. It says, Just Disco had been giving us less than 4 hours service per day while we are being charged as 20-hour customers here at state low cost. Well,
that's actually Yunus Abdul. Yeah. Ademola Afolayan says, this new commissioner is actually trying, and I hope they won't change him soon. He does weekly engagement with discos and customers, disco customers. Please tell all to check their Twitter handle on Mondays for details of meeting link. Okay, Afolayan. Good PR for Mr. Shatti and NEC. Well, I'm sure he's heard you, wherever it is.
I do understand that that road show or the town hall is still ongoing, I think for Ibadan today or so. But say this one, please tell NERC that Just Disco has been giving us less than 4 hours service per day while we're being charged at 20 hours consumer. Oh, we already took that.
Okay, so the complaints are unending here. So clearly NERC has got to do a lot more. So there you go. That is the show today. We thank you all for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. I'm Chamberlain.
I'm Kayode Okikiolu.
And I'm Ayo Makinde. Please do stay safe out there. Have a good day.